When we talk about the Lord's Prayer up to now, Jesus has talked about giving us a paradigm by which we are to pray. So the point of the Lord's Prayer is not for us to just repeat it mindlessly, but it's to understand the priorities Jesus will want us to have when we pray to God the Father. And he begins by saying that our prayers should begin with the right understanding of who God is to us. He is our Father, so that we can have this intimacy with him that most religions never taught about at that time. It begins by understanding not just him as Father, but understanding his will, his desire, so that we can pray his kingdom first, his will be done ahead of our own. And as we seek after God's will, and as we seek after God's kingdom, what that will require is that we will need God's provision, both physical provision, namely daily bread, and spiritual provision, namely forgiveness. And so that's the paradigm we've been unfolding these past 3 to 4 weeks. But the reason why he ends with this final topic is because this topic actually is the barrier to our prayer life in a lot of ways. What hinders our intimacy with God is how we deal with temptation and sin. And if we don't deal with it rightly, even as much as we want to, we won't have intimacy with the Father. We won't really seek after his will. We won't really trust in him for physical and spiritual provision. Instead, we will take matters into our own hands. And so today's topic is going to be about temptation. How does Jesus say we are to pray regarding temptation? Now, when I say the word temptation, I want to begin with this first point about what is a temptation or a trial. Now, the interesting thing about the Greek word is that the same Greek word for temptation can also be translated as trial or testing. So the same word can have 3 different meanings depending on the context. So how do you know if something is a trial or a temptation or a test? You might be wondering, right? Well, good question. Let's break it down a little bit. It begins by understanding who is giving this trial or temptation. Now, a trial is anything that causes you difficulty in life. So a trial can be a person, it can be a relationship, it can be a circumstance. Maybe your health is a trial, your finances are a trial, living in a certain country with persecution could be a trial. And so whatever the trial is, what matters first is that we have to understand who is giving this trial to you. Because different people can give you a trial, and these are the 3 possibilities. First, Satan can be the one giving you the trial. And when he gives you a trial, it's meant to be a temptation. In other words, he wants you to fail and to fall into sin. So he wants to bring difficulty into your life so that you will sin. That's his purpose. However, God can give you a trial, as we learned in James chapter 1. But he intends this trial not for you to fall into sin, but he wants you to overcome it and endure it and respond to it biblically so that your faith will be strengthened. So something from the outside can look exactly the same, but depending on who's giving it, it has a completely different intention for your life. This is the way James said in James chapter 1, verse 13. He says, "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, and he himself tempts no one." So Satan will give you a trial, but he wants you to be tempted to fall into sin. God may give you a trial, but he wants you to overcome it and be strengthened in your faith. But there's a final culprit, your desires. Your desires can give you a trial. Satan, in fact, uses your own desires to tempt you to fall into sin. This is why we all have different trials, by the way. Satan has studied mankind since the beginning of time, and he knows what will be the bait that works for us. You're not the first person he's ever dealt with. Since Adam, all the way up to now, he's made every single person fall into sin at some point except for one, which is what we're going to get to in this prayer. And so, God might bring a difficult person in your life to teach you how to love and to strengthen your faith. Satan might bring a difficult person in your life to cause you to fall into sin and to respond angrily. Or Satan knows your desires, use those desires to entice yourself to take matters into your own hand to fall into sin. And so do you see why the translators, even though it's the same word, translate it differently? It could be a trial, it could be a temptation, or it could be a test. It all depends on who's giving it and what the purpose is. Now, there's a second aspect to it. It's not just understanding who is giving this trial or temptation, but how do you respond? And in a lot of ways, this is the most important fact. Because here's the thing we have to also understand. even though Satan might tempt you, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to sin. Did you know that? For example, who's an example of a person in the Bible who was tempted continually but never sinned? Jesus, right? And so if something was given to you by Satan, let's say, it doesn't mean you have to then fail that test. You can't turn a temptation into a trial when you resist temptation the way you're supposed to. Now, God can place a trial into your life, and He has no intention of tempting you to sin, but because of your desires, you might respond negatively or wrongly to that, and you then turned a trial into a temptation, right? So God may have allowed you to lose your job. He doesn't then want you to use that as a reason to go steal a bunch of money, but your desires are the things that propelled you to do those things. And so a lot of times, I think people get overwhelmed and try to think so much about, is this coming from God? Is this coming from Satan? It doesn't really matter where it's coming from. Because whether Satan's giving it to you, you can resist it. Whether it's God giving it to you, you might screw it up. So the X factor in all of this is you. How do you respond to trials? How do you respond to temptation? Because with the presence of the Holy Spirit, you can resist temptation. And through this prayer, we're going to see how you can do so. And so whether God is giving it to you, or whether Satan's giving it to you, or whether you're being enticed by your own desires, here's the thing we have to know. The good news is it's possible for a Christian, now not an unbeliever, but for a Christian can fight temptation. A Christian doesn't have to sin. Did you know it is possible that you don't have to sin today? You're like, too late, I already sinned this morning. Oh, well, let's start over again. All right, after this service, you don't have to sin. You don't have to sin. And that's the point of this prayer. Jesus wouldn't put this in the prayer if He knew that there's no way for you to ever overcome temptation. Hey, you're never going to succeed at this, but pray that you're led out of temptation. That's a sadistic God if that's the case. No, He's saying pray this because some of you are sinning unnecessarily. Some of you are falling into temptation unnecessarily because you're not going about it the right way. You're trying to take matters into your own hands. You're trying to figure out your way. You're trying to talk to your pastor, your friends, and trying to maybe solve it with money. But there's a path that God has for you to say no and to get out of every situation that you encounter. And so the key word in this part of the prayer is lead. Lead us not into temptation. What does that imply? It implies that you must be willing to follow. That's the issue. It's not that there isn't a way out. It's that we're not willing to take that way out, even when God makes it clear to us. Because a lot of times the way God shows us in the Bible, the way to handle temptation and sin, it sounds very impractical. Love my enemies? Okay, let me find a different way. Pray for those who persecute me? Well, let me find a different way. I don't want to follow that way, so I'll create my own middle way where it kind of sounds good with God and it's still practical for me. And what happens is you walk on a path that leads you to temptation and you sin over and over and over again. This is the way I think about it. Imagine if you're walking down a road and there's a pothole there and you trip on that pothole. Then the next day you walk down on that road and that pothole's still there and you trip on that pothole again. So you start praying to God, God, help me. I keep tripping on this pothole. What do you think He'll say to you? Get on a different road, right? Duh. But here's the problem. You like that road because you know everybody on the side. Well, this is a road I've been going on for 30 years. It's comfortable. So God, I don't want to go on a completely new road. I just want to know how to avoid that road, walk around the pothole. You see, what we try to do is we try to manage our sin. Because we don't want to take dramatic measures and really go on a different road. Because going on a different road requires repentance. Remember the word repent? It means to turn 180 degrees and go to a completely direction. We don't want to completely cut off our career. We just want to manage it. We don't want to completely cut off that relationship. We just want to manage it so it's not so sinful all the time. Do you see the problem now? You see, the question in all of this is, are you willing to be led, not just do you want answers to manage? Because there are some paths in life, and there are some roads that pothole is not going to move. You need to move and go in a different direction. Just like when Joseph was tempted, he didn't try to manage that whole thing. He ran away because he knew, if I try to manage this desire and this lady who's coming on to me, it's not going to end well. And so this is a way Paul summarizes how to fight temptation. And I want you to show this verse from 1 Corinthians 10:13 because this is a very key verse. He says, no temptation has overtaken you, but such is common to man. And God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also so that you will be able to endure it. First, do you notice the word escape? That's a very cool, I think it's a cool word. I'll explain to you what it means. So back in those days, if you're like a rich aristocrat that lived in a nice house, the house will be surrounded by a lot of land or fields. And what happens is that during a time of war, the rich aristocrats knew that soldiers will eventually come and probably try to take them over. So they created a secret passageway, a secret underground tunnel that went underneath the house and led them out to one of their fields so that they could run away when the soldiers come. It's like the secret passageway. That's the word picture Paul is giving here. He's saying when you are being attacked by Satan and when you're being overwhelmed with temptation, God always provides a secret passageway out of that. The problem is we think we could fight these soldiers off with our own power. Well, with a little more planning, I can get these arrows out of the way. Oh, you know, I have a lot of resources and I have a lot of money in the bank. I could figure out this. But instead, we don't take that way of escape that God provides. Do you notice it says every time? And do you also notice he says that there is no temptation that is overtaking you that is what? Not common. In other words, this is not unique to you, Andrew. I think some of us think like, oh, nobody understands how hard this is. No, everybody understands how hard this is. Jesus understands how hard this is because unlike you, he's never fallen into temptation, so he's felt the full weight of temptation every time. And so every time you are tempted and you fall into sin, you cannot blame God for that at the end, according to this passage. He gave you the secret passageway. He told you this is the way out, but you just want to manage it, you want to figure out your own way, or you just thought it wasn't very practical to do it God's way. So you're saying, what's that secret passageway? You guys ready? Let's keep going. 5 steps to the left, 3 steps, no, okay. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 18. We get a little more insight into the secret way of escape. In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 18, it talks about how Jesus, it says that he himself was tempted in that which he has suffered. He is able to come to the aid of those who are tempted. In other words, one of the reasons why Jesus became a man is so that he understands and knows how to overcome temptation. So any temptation you face is common to humanity. And Jesus has faced that already. So he's the blueprint by which you escape every temptation. What do I do if a friend betrays me? Well, look at Jesus' blueprint. What did he do when his friend betrayed him? What do I do if I don't have money in the bank? Well, what did Jesus do when he lived in a very poor family? How did he deal with it? You start to see he is the one who was tempted in every way, yet without sin. So he's able to help everyone else who's tempted. Again, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15. For we do not have a high priest, speaking about Jesus, who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all this as we are, yet without sin. So what's the secret passageway? What are we praying for when we say, lead us not into temptation? It is lead us to Jesus is the passageway. You know how you get out of every situation, every temptation you're facing? You follow the footsteps of Jesus. You follow the way that he has already set forward. This isn't new ground you have to figure out. He's already done it ahead of you. Everything you're going to encounter in life, Jesus has faced that. He understands. And he overcame it without sinning. And so all you have to do is stay close to Jesus and follow his footsteps in that situation. All you have to do is not go in that pothole on that road that you like so much, but go on the road Jesus tells you to go on in the other direction. All you must do when you pray to lead us not into temptation, it means to follow your King's lead. What direction would he want me to go? And here's the thing, I think we all know the right answers. The hard thing is actually doing it, right? That prick. Andrew, stop talking about forgiveness. I know who I need to forgive. Stop mentioning it, right? We all know the answers. These are not hard things to understand, but what's the hard thing? To actually follow and do it. This is why we need to pray. Do you notice the prayer is not for more knowledge? The prayer is that you would follow. Because our wills do not want to follow Jesus' ways all the time. Let me remind you what Jesus said in the same sermon earlier in Matthew chapter 5, verses 29 to 30. He talked about the measures we should be willing to take to fight temptation and sin. He says, if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off, throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell. Now, Jesus is not telling you to literally cut off your limbs and gouge your eyes, but he's making a clear point. You must be willing to do whatever it takes and be radically denying your flesh and your desires in order to fight sin in your life. In other words, nothing should be negotiable when it comes to the fight to sin. And I think all of us know that that is really true. Because some of us for decades have been trying to manage our sin problems and our sin patterns, and it keeps coming up over and over again, doesn't it? And we're not getting any traction. And so what Jesus is saying is, you must be willing to cut off things dramatically. Any potential paths, any roads with the holes on the ground, anything that will lead you into temptation and sin, you gotta cut that off. So if there's a certain relationship that keeps causing you to sin, you cut it off, even if you love that person. Listen, if this was a matter of life and death, I think all of us will be willing to cut off more things in our lives. I think the reason why we don't is we don't think it's that serious. We don't think sin is that big of a deal. We think it's something we can manage. Oh, as long as I'm 50% good and 50% sinful, little sin. Everyone's sinner, right? We're all sinners. No one's perfect. Who are you to judge, Andrew? Exactly. So let's just sin, you sin, I sin. We walk in that path. Let's keep tripping over the potholes over and over again. But don't expect God to give you that way of escape if we're not willing to take it whenever he presents it. And so if there's certain things in your life that are causing you to sin, if you're really greedy for money and you cannot control your spending, let someone else take control of your finances. Cut up your credit cards. Oh, that's dramatic. Well, if this is a matter of life and death, you'll do it, won't you? If your career is just causing you to sin and you're prioritizing your career over other people, or change your career. There's millions of jobs you can do. You don't have to do that career. If you love your kids too much, you idolize them, and you can't stop living for them, then cut them off. Get rid of your kid. I'm kidding. No, not that one. But you know what I'm getting at, though. Nothing should be off limits when it comes to the fight of temptation, if it's as serious as we claim it to be according to the Bible. There's a disconnect. We all know sin is not good, but we don't think it's that urgent of a matter to really cut things off. To change friends, change churches, change locations, change careers because of your battle with sin. I know you guys are pushing back with this. This sounds very fire and brimstone today, Andrew. But let me frame it a different way for you. Every single one of us might push back and say, well, I just don't have the self-control to do that, Andrew. I don't have the willpower to say no. I would push back and say, you do have the self-control to do it if you have a different incentive. And this is what I mean. Imagine for a second that you have no money in the bank. You're living month to month. And let's say you have a struggle with anger. You just blow up on people, get into fights, and you gossip and whatever. Let's just say, there's no way, Andrew. This is the way I am. This is the way I've been born. This is generational patterns in my family. I can never change. And I will say, okay, if for 1 month you can control your temper, I'll give you $1 million. Every month you control your temper. Whatever it takes, do whatever measure you have to do. You could lock yourself in a room, you could go in a cave, whatever, but whatever it is, if you don't blow up on a person for this month, I'll give you $1 million. Could you do it? Now, some of you are thinking, I don't need $1 million. I got plenty of millions. Okay, different incentive then. If you're sick with a chronic illness, and if you can go 1 month without blowing up on a person, God says, I will take away all your illnesses. Can you do it for 1 month? Okay, you're like, well, I'm healthy. I don't need that. Okay, let's say you love people who are not believers and don't follow Jesus. And Jesus said, for every month you control this problem, you don't sin in this way, I will save one of your loved ones every month. Would you do it? You start to see, all of a sudden, we have a lot of self-control when we have a different incentive, don't we? And here's where it comes down to. You know why we are not really fighting sin to the extent that we can fight it? We're living with the wrong incentive. Because most of our incentive is, I don't want to go to hell. Just tell me what I need to do so I don't go to hell. That's not the right incentive. The incentive is, I want God's name and his kingdom to be magnified on earth. And I know that the number one barrier from Jesus' will to be seen in Sierra Madre is my sin. So tell me, Jesus, give me the power and help me overcome the sin, even just for 1 week, for your name's sake. Even for just 1 month, so that people will be saved. Even just for 1 year, so that things will be transformative around me because I'm willing to say no to my flesh over and over again. This is the way one person said it about change. This is when change really happens in your life. Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. You guys ever been there with the doctor? You could stay the same, but you will get a heart attack in 6 months. Or you could start eating broccoli more, and you might hate kale, Andrew. But the pain of eating kale is a lot less than the pain of staying the same, isn't it? And that's the same way with our spiritual life. The pain of staying the same eventually will outweigh the pain of change. And when that happens, you're going to change. When you get to the point where you've been dealing with the same sin struggle, you're still lusting after 20, 30 years, you're still ruining a relationship because of your uncontrollable tongue, and you're still doing this after 30 years, at some point, you're going to have to feel tired of being sick and tired of living in sin. It's not fun living in sin over and over and over again. And when that pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change, you will start to change. But you have to be incentivized with the greater desire to cancel out the lesser desire. You know what our greatest problem is as a people? It's not that we love sin too much. I think sometimes we focus on the sin too much in our society. Oh, I love money too much, so I got to start hating money. I hate money. I hate money. But that's not, you love money. That's great. That's fine. You love money. Just be honest. Here's how you fight sin. It's not by focusing on the sin and trying to love it less. The way you fight sin is when you have a greater desire that outweighs that present desire. I love to sleep. I hate going all-nighters, but sometimes I pull the all-nighter because I love my son's health, and if they're hooked up in the hospital all night, I will stay up later for that because my desire to see my son healthy is greater than my desire to sleep. So I'm willing to sacrifice that. Do you see that? When you start, the way you'll start sacrificing is you have a greater desire for something else that outweighs the present desire you're holding on to. This is the way C.S. Lewis, the author of Chronicles of Narnia, said it. He summarizes it this way. It was seen that our Lord finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us. Like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea, we are far too easily pleased. The issue is not that you love sin too much. The issue is all of us love Jesus too little. Because if your incentive was driven by your love for Jesus, and if you love Jesus too much, you wouldn't struggle with sin. This analogy I give, if you love your spouse too much, you wouldn't have a wandering eye. And those with the wandering eye is not because they just love other people too much, it's because they love their spouse too little. And so the goal is not to be like sin bad, bad, kids bad, job bad, money bad. That's not what you have desires. You're created as people with desires. The goal is to make sure your greatest desire is Jesus. But the problem is that we love Jesus too little that he becomes a competition with all these other idols in our lives. And that's why we're not willing to change. And so when we are praying to God to help us, to lead us out into temptation, what we are really praying is to increase our desire for Jesus. Increase our passion for Jesus. Increase our affection for Jesus. Increase our desire for God's kingdom. Because as we seek after God and his kingdom first, that greater desire will outweigh the other desires we have in life. But do you notice there's a second half? It's not just lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Literally, the Greek phrase is deliver us from the evil one, referring to Satan. In Ephesians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul says that our battle is not against flesh and blood, it is against Satan and the demons, the spiritual realm. And what happens is that oftentimes, if I say the word Satan, I think some of us here feel like we're a little too sophisticated to actually believe there's a Satan. That sounds archaic. You really believe there's a Satan working in the background? The problem is my coworker, not Satan. The problem is my marriage, not Satan. The problem is the government, not Satan. But do you know what's behind all of these things, according to Ephesians chapter 6? Satan is the god of this world, according to 1 Corinthians. He's the one operating the world system. Who do you think is the one distracting you from the things of God? Who do you think is the one that's enticing you to follow something else besides the way of Jesus? You see, the first step is that we have to understand we're in a spiritual battle. And some of us are in denial about that. We even think me saying Satan sounds archaic. You're just one of those weird fundamentalists that believes in Satan, Andrew. Yes, I believe in Satan because Jesus fought Satan. He talks about Satan. You see, what's happening is not what you see. The battle is the invisible things that you do not see. The things that are causing all these issues. And when you live during a time of war, you will always be on the defensive because you know at any moment a bomb can explode your life. Look at people who live during a time of war versus us that live during a time of peace. Do you notice that they don't hold that much attachment to their houses? They are ready to run at any moment. Do you notice they're not sitting around talking about the Dodgers all day? I'm guilty, number one, so I'm not judging. But if I was living in a place where a bomb is about to go off, I don't have time to watch sports. Do you notice the urgency level of someone living during a time of war versus someone who isn't? And Paul is saying, do you recognize that you live during a time of war? There's a spiritual war constantly going on, whether you know it or whether you're engaging in it. Satan is at battle for your soul. And Satan knows things more than you do. He knows the Bible better than you. That's why he knows how to twist it in a way that you'll actually buy it. Who do you think is causing all these things to come to your mind? Who do you think is using your desires to magnify it in your life? Who do you think is the one? Every time you want to pray, do you notice that something comes up all of a sudden when you need to pray? Every time you want to read the Bible, something comes up and then your mind just like, it's so boring. Or every time I'm preaching, you're falling asleep, right? Who do you think's doing that? Maybe, that's my voice. Or there's spiritual things happening all the time. There's an unseen realm that is happening all around us. And here's what we have to understand. According to Paul and Jesus, Satan is more powerful than you. You cannot beat Satan at his own game. He's been at this for thousands of years. Those of you who are a little older and more seasoned in life, have you talked to someone who's like 15, they think they have all the answers, they plan everything out? Don't you just kind of chuckle? Good plan. Let's see how that goes, right? And that's sometimes how we come off to Satan. You haven't seen Andrew yet. Yeah, Adam you conquered, Abraham you conquered, David you got, but you're not going to get me. I'm going to be the exception. And you think he's going to be scared by that? There's only one person Satan is scared of, by the way, in the Bible. It's the one he couldn't get to sin. And that is the one we are supposed to follow the footsteps of, the secret passage. Jesus is the only one Satan is scared of. Jesus is the only one whose voice he actually listens to. He does not listen to you. And so how does Satan then, being more powerful than you, how does he end up beating you? You want to know his tactics? Look at James chapter 1, verse 14 through 15. He says this. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. The word desire is a compound word in the Greek. It's epi, desire. Now, we know the prefix epi. It's to intensify something. So, for example, something is the epicenter, it's the intensified center of something. Or if something is an epidemic, it means it's a widespread, intensified, widespread influence of something. And so here's how Satan gets us. He gets one of our desires that we naturally have, and he makes it an epi-desire in our life. The issue is not that we have desires. There's nothing wrong to love your kids, to love money, to love making a living. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be comfortable, wanting to be happy. Desires are things that we have naturally. Here's the problem. When one of those desires or many desires become an epi-desire in your life, when that becomes an epidemic or the epicenter of your life, when that becomes the center focus of your life, when all other things are revolving around this desire, that's when Satan lures and entices you. That's hunting terms, by the way, by James. That's how he gets you. He tempts you with what he already knows you want, and he makes it really appealing to you. You have a natural desire for control? Here, take more control, Andrew. Don't trust anybody. You take more control. Plan more. You have a desire for respect? Don't let that person disrespect you. Fight back. Fight for your respect. You have a desire for pleasure? That was pretty fun, right? But imagine if you had 10 times more money, how much more fun you can have. And he just using that and using that and using that until you fall. And so if you aren't alert and if you're not praying to God to lead you out of temptation, you have no shot against Satan. Not at all. The best of men are men at best. And the power you have as a human pales in comparison to the power that Satan and his demons have over you. So here's the question. How do you get delivered from the evil one then, Jesus? How does God help us fight Satan if he's that powerful? How do we fight Satan if he already knows what we desire and he has studied our heart and he's going to magnify that and make it that epi desire? This is how. He sends his son into this world to crush Satan's head. And whoever stays close to his son is protected by the son. And when you stand next to the son, Satan is scared, not because of you and how smart you are. Satan is scared because he's already felt the punches of the son, and he knows he cannot overcome the one who is protecting you at all times. Growing up, I got made fun of a lot because I was really fat and chubby. And so what I figured out was, the few times I tried to fight back, I also wasn't a good fighter. So this is a bad combination. When you're fat and chubby, you can't fight. You're just a prime target for bullies. So just like, okay. And I'm always kind of figuring out, how am I going to fight these bullies? These guys are bigger and stronger than me. And then I figured it out. There's two guys who was known for fighting in my school. And I was good at making people laugh. So I just started befriending them, making them laugh, giving them part of my lunch. And over the years, I invested in this relationship, and I was one of their best friends. Now, people would have never put Chubby Fat Andrew with fighter on the school together. They never knew I had that relationship. And so I started to feel a little protected. And so when someone would say something to me, I was pretty sharp with my words. I knew their sore spots. I knew the insecurity. And I'll say something back, knowing that they'll get mad. Oh, well, at least my mom loves me. Whoa. They're like, uh-oh, I crossed the line. I'm going to meet you after, Andrew. You are dead. I'll say, okay, where do you want to meet? You know where it is, the bleachers behind the football field. Got it. I'll meet you there. And they were a little confused. Why is he not scared? Well, they didn't know my secret relationship I had. Called up my two friends. 4 p.m., can you meet me at the bleachers behind the football field? So I'll be walking there, and he's there waiting, clenching, ready to go, going like this, taking his shirt off, doing all that thing. Me and my big one-pack bellies coming along, just skipping. And I'll be like, oh, by the way, you know one of my best friends right here? Hey, and so one of my best friends just stand there. He'll just be looking at him. And so I could see the guy. He's sizing me up, and he's like, oh, I got him. But then he looks to the right. He's like, oh, my gosh, but he's right next to him. And he's doing the calculation. If I punch Andrew, this guy's going to come in, and I'm in big trouble. And every time after they size me up, they come up to me. He's like, you know what? We're cool, right, Andrew? No more, right? And they just walk away. Now, it would be foolish of me to walk away to say, wow, look at how strong I am. The biggest bullies don't want to mess with me. No, I knew where my power came from. I knew why I was invincible in that school. It was because of the relationship I had with the one who held power. It's because I stayed close to the one who has all the power in the school. And the minute someone saw that, they knew I was protected by that fighter. You want to know when Satan will back off in your life and he can't defeat you anymore? When he starts to see how close Jesus is to you. And when he sizes you up, I have no problem with Andrew. He's so easy to make fall. I made him fall this morning because he didn't have a coffee and he screamed at somebody. Easy. But when Andrew's close to Jesus, this guy has all the power. I felt that punch from Jesus, and I don't want to feel that anymore. And the way we stay close with Jesus, the way we have him as our best friend standing next to us, is through prayer. It's through prayer. And so my encouragement is not to guilt you, like, you got to pray or else you go to hell. That's not what it's about. Prayer is about building intimacy with God. Prayer is about staying close to the one who has power. Prayer is about the one it's about getting close to the one who can stand next to you and help you overcome whatever temptation you face. And so if you cannot overcome the temptations in your life and you are finding yourself falling into patterns of sin, remember, you are not alone. Jesus is waiting to stand next to you if you invite him to Jesus is right here saying, I understand, Andrew. Just ask me to help, and I can stand right next to you and help you. And whenever Satan is coming at you and the spiritual battle is happening and you are feeling overwhelmed, pray, and Jesus will always answer by protecting you. That is the promise of the Lord's Prayer. That you can resist Satan's temptation if you trust in the one who stands next to you. You can walk on a better path that doesn't have potholes if you trust in the one standing next to you. You can say no to whatever temptation you face if you trust in the one who stands next to you. But the problem is sometimes we like to stand by ourselves and we don't like to ask for help, and that is when we fall. So Bethany Church, can we remind ourselves, you're not that strong. I don't care how long you've been at church, you cannot beat Satan at this game. But there is one person who has beaten him so severely that he crushed his head with his heel, and his name is Jesus. And Jesus says in this prayer, I promise you, if you ask to be delivered from temptation, I will guide you. I promise you, if you ask that you need protection from the evil one, I'll stand next to you. And when Peter fell, right before he fell, do you remember one of the passages that Jesus told Peter? He said this in Luke chapter 22, verse 31 to 32. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Do you know why Peter came back to Jesus and Judas never did? It's not because Peter is a better person than Judas. He denied Jesus 3 times. It's because Jesus was praying for Peter. I want to remind you, you have a great high priest, and it's not the Pope over there in Rome. Your great high priest, his name is Jesus. And if you pray everything in his name, he will pray on your behalf to the Father. And he will protect you from Satan's attempts. And he will make sure that he cannot sift you like wheat. He is there every step of the way if you would trust in him by faith. Let's pray.